Hey guys, it's Justin at the Shabab Review, and today I finally get to talk about Man of Steel. God, the hype surrounding this movie is insane, and I'm not saying coming from everybody else, coming from me. I was insanely hyped for this movie. The biggest movie I've been looking forward to since Dark Knight Rises. Those both movies have just the hugest build up to it. I'm a huge Superman fan. I love Zack Snyder, and Christopher Nolan's awesome. Not only that, they shot the Smallville scenes in Plano, Illinois, which is not too far from me, and my sister's fiance's mom lives there, and they shot it in downtown Plano where she worked, and I got to go there and visit the set practically. So there's a lot of personal stuff in this movie, and it's just something I've been looking forward to a lot of time. Look, let's see if we can get this here. Yes, there's a Man of Steel poster on my wall. Yes. So as you guys can tell, I was looking forward to this movie a lot. And it's not perfect. It's not the 10 out of 10 I wanted it to be. But it comes very close. And it's a very, very good movie. So to start out with the plot, the movie opens on Krypton. And this is probably the best film version of Krypton. It's like a fully developed world. It's not just an ice planet in the Donner films, and that's just awesome. And then you see Jor-El played by Russell Crowe, who's great, and it kind of opens like the first Superman movie, where he's telling the council how Krypton's going to be destroyed, and they have to get ready for this, and nobody's believing him. And then comes General Zod, who is the military leader, and he's starting a rebellion to take over, because he also agrees that the council doesn't listen, but he's not friends with Jor-El, let's put it that way. So obviously Jor-El sends his son, Kyle, Superman, off to Earth, and Krypton gets destroyed. And then we cut to years later, which I thought was a really cool idea. The movie plays out like Batman Begins, where it starts right now, and then it flashes back to the backstory. And I like how they did that. They did that so it wouldn't just be your typical Superman backstory. So it starts out with Clark Kent. He's not living with his family or anything. He's on the road, trying to find himself, kind of. And you start to see flashbacks to his childhood and all that stuff. And pretty soon, Zod finds out where Clark is and goes to Earth, planning to turn Earth into Krypton, to repopulate Krypton on Earth instead, using the Kodak, which was this big memory thing with all the info of Krypton that Jor-El gave to Superman when he sent him to Earth. So that's the main plot. The plot's actually kind of simple. I've been saying that for a lot of reviews lately, but this movie's actually easier to talk about than Iron Man 3 or Star Trek because there's not as many twists and turns that I can't talk about and have to wait till a spoiler video. Which, by the way, we're still doing. Me and Sam are going to be doing a spoiler video because we both saw this movie last night in the midnight show. We'll get to that a little bit later, though. So the cast for this movie is all great. Everybody does their job perfectly. I was a little worried at first when they were announcing the cast because it was all just big names. I thought that wouldn't work and be too obvious that all these big people are in this movie, but they all just transform into their parts. Henry Cavill, who plays Superman, he is great. He embodies Superman. He's not Christopher Reeve great, because Christopher Reeve is Superman, but he still does it really well. He's awesome. He stands out the most in this movie as the best part. Amy Adams as Lois Lane, she was very good. She didn't do a whole lot of reporter-ish stuff, so she didn't have as much of that Lois character to her, if that makes much sense, but she still did very good. Michael Shannon as Zod wasn't as awesome as I was expecting. I don't know, just the way the trailers were advertising it, I thought he was going to be awesome, menacing, Star Trek Into Darkness is John Harrison and Iron Man 3's Mandarin type villain where he just leaps off the screen oh god, this guy means business. And a lot of times it's just him shouting. And I don't know if I necessarily blame that on the actor or the writing, but he was still good. Don't get me wrong on that. He was still very good, but he didn't blow me away as a bad guy as I was hoping and actually kind of expecting him to do. But he's still a good General Zod. He still makes a memorable villain, just not the most memorable. bad guy. But some of the lesser cast, Russell Crowe as Jor-El and Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent, they both nailed their performances. Like, Kevin Costner is only in maybe like 4 or so scenes, and 3 of them were at the beginning of the movie, and you still remember him as like an important character, and his scenes that he's in are emotional and very memorable. They just work very well. So, if you want me to talk about the problems a little bit, I feel the beginning of the movie was very disjointed and a little hard to follow. You got the opening scene at Crib Town, which is fine. That seems perfect. But then we cut to modern day, and they didn't do the flashback thing too well. Because, like, the way the structure of the opening of the movie is, you see Clark in modern day working on, like, a fishing job, and all of a sudden he saves these people in what should have been a really big action scene, but is only, like, 3 minutes long. And then he runs away from that. You see him walking around a town. Then he flashes back to when he was a kid and he saved this bus falling off a bridge, which is just a short scene. And it feels like it's too much at the same time. It needed to be maybe padded out a little bit. And just there's some things that didn't make sense. I don't know. I had a hard time following the opening part in the Arctic where they find it's practically the film versions. This version's Fortress of Solitude, but it's like that ship. But it says like a ship that Clark has. And that whole scene, I don't know. I just really didn't understand a whole lot that was going on. It was very kind of just like, huh, what? Huh? And Zack Snyder does a lot of handheld, shaky cam in this movie. And sometimes it can be distracting. Honestly, I mean, which is surprising because in his previous movies, he never really did shaky cam. Maybe it's because his other movies had a lot of slow-mo, so they wanted to use the giant wide shots to show the slow motion. This had no slow motion in it, which is kind of like a Zack Snyder trademark, but I don't mind it. We didn't need it. And I just found the shaky cam to be a little annoying. It could be because I saw it in IMAX 3D on a huge screen. So it's a simple scene, which is in the trailer, where Jonathan Kent's talking to young Clark about how like he shouldn't have saved the bus and how it wasn't like a good idea. Very emotional stuff. But the camera keeps shaking. And you're like, you couldn't just keep it still for this one scene. They're just standing there talking. It's not an intense scene. And I found that a little distracting. And another thing I found surprising is that most of the second and third act is all action, which may surprise some people. It's a lot. It's kind of like I would compare it to this, but it's still better than this. Like how the whole final act of Transformers 3 was just a giant action scene. That was the whole like second half of the movie. It's just a giant action scene in Chicago. It's kind of like that, but it's better. It's actually enjoyable. Don't worry, it's actually enjoyable. Some fight scenes maybe go on for a little too long, and the whole part where they're attacking Metropolis, I do feel that Superman gets lost in the action during that part because there's a lot of other stuff with like the military helping out and stuff like that, and I felt Superman kind of got lost. I'm like, I want to see Superman doing stuff. So that was a little strange. It wasn't. If you watch the first 2 trailers for this movie, the teaser, which premiered with Dark Knight Rises, and the second trailer, you expect it to be like this grand movie with a lot of like emotions and like themes and stuff like that. It doesn't have a whole lot of that. It has some of that. Don't get me wrong. It has that, but it's not as much of that. It mostly focuses on the action a lot, and I felt it didn't need to. There wasn't a whole lot of character development. Let's put it that way. There wasn't a whole lot, which really surprised me. And I wanted to see more of that. And I was surprised that the end of the movie is basically, the last half of the movie is basically just three huge action scenes. One in Smallville, one in Metropolis, and one in Metropolis, but it's Zod and Superman fighting each other. And that's basically the end of the movie. If you just talk about the plot, it's a very, like, short plot. It's just, the movie doesn't feel 2.5 hours long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. It doesn't really feel that long. It feels shorter because it's just a lot of action. But the good thing about the action is that it's so cool seeing Superman do all these crazy things that you could never see him do in the previous movies. Well, you could have a Superman Returns, but they just didn't do it because they wanted it to be 2.5 hours of talking. But Superman, like, all the flying scenes of him flying around, it's kind of obvious CG, but it worked. I still bought it. I was still like, that's awesome when Superman's flying around fighting the Zod's, like, not henchmen, but sidekicks. It was kind of obvious, but it was still awesome. And a lot of the action stuff involving Superman was great. that whole fight scene at the end between Superman and Zod was just awesome. And I just love seeing that because we've never seen that in a Superman movie. This movie, for the most part, gets things right. Like I said, it has pacing and plot issues, especially at the beginning where it's disjointing. And if that's starting to annoy you, don't worry, it gets better as the movie goes on. It's actually kind of like The Dark Knight Rises, where, I don't know about you guys, but when I first saw Dark Knight Rises, the beginning was kind of not as disjointing as Man of Steel, but kind of like slow, kind of hard to follow. But that's because they had introduced all this stuff. And then once I saw it again, that beginning flowed by and I had no problem with it. So I don't think I'm going to have that perfect of like a resolution with this when I see Man of Steel again, which I know I'm gonna and I hope to soon. I don't think the beginning is going to flow as perfectly, but it probably adds to the fact because it's my first time seeing it. When I see it again, I'll probably pick up on more things. And one other thing, a lot of people were criticizing this movie for the lack of humor and stuff like that. And I was like, really? It's just because the movie doesn't have all the jokes? That's not a big deal. But now I see the movie, I kind of agree with them. The movie is very serious. And I never thought I'd say this, but The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises are funnier movies than a Superman movie. And yeah, they have better lines, better, not jokes, but better funny moments. This doesn't really have anything that really sticks out. The only time that people chuckled sometimes during some of the stuff, but the only line that people laughed at was a line at the end that was, I really thought it was kind of lowbrow for this movie, where this army general is talking to Superman, and he flies away, and the general turns to this like army soldiers with their female, and he just goes, "What are you smiling about?" She just goes, "I think he's kind of hot." And I'm like, really? I thought this movie would go past those type of jokes. And that's the only real joke. That happens at the end of the movie. That's one of the final scenes in the movie. That's kind of surprising. So I do kind of criticize it a little bit for the lack of humor because it felt weird in a Superman movie. This movie didn't completely feel like a Superman movie. That's because it wasn't doing the typical Superman thing. It didn't like do the typical backstory. Then the movie starts with him going to the Daily Planet and working there. And it's not that. It starts out differently. And I like it. It did feel a little strange, but I'm not holding that against it. I like how they only said the word Superman twice in the movie. And for the whole movie, it's just Kyle or Clark. They always call him Cal. I guess it's like his nickname for Kyle. I always thought it was weird. But I don't mind that. And the one problem is the one scene they do say it didn't feel too necessary. And there's no real, like, the scene is kind of just there. It's almost like they're like, ooh, we never said Superman in the movie. Let's write in that one scene where that guy says it. And it didn't feel too necessary. It was kind of mildly amusing, but wasn't the most necessary thing. Sam would probably talk about that more when he do a spoiler video, because he brought that up on the car ride home about that. And I'm like, yeah, now that I think about it, you have a good point there. And I'm not going to really say what they are. They're kind of hard to spot unless you're like, you have to really pay attention to these. But there's some cool throwbacks to the comics, to the storylines and stuff like that. I really like this movie. A lot of stuff was riding on this movie. Not that it has to be a good Superman movie because we haven't had one since 1981, but this could lead into a Justice League movie, and I hope it does. I really hope it does because this could work. I want to see Henry Cavill's Superman in more movies and a Justice League movie, and this movie does it for the most part. It's a good introduction to what this universe could be. It's not as great as like Iron Man 1, which that was just like the perfect start to the Avengers, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This isn't the perfect start, but it's a good one, and it's one of those movies that all the hype around it actually feels surreal that I've actually already seen it and talking about it. You know what I mean? Kind of like with Dark Knight Rises, that feels weird that I've already seen it. Right? I really enjoyed the movie. I mean, like I said, I mentioned the flaws, but the positive things totally outweighed the flaws. The action scenes, for the most part, were thrilling. They might have gone on for a little bit longer than necessary, but their action scenes were thrilling. The cast was great. The direction was very good. A little bit of shaky cam. And all around, it was a lot of fun. Out of 10, I'm going to go 9 out of 10. A solid 9. It's better than Iron Man 3, but still not as good as Star Trek. I still say Star Trek was a little bit better. I saw the movie in IMAX 3D. 3D did nothing. The IMAX was alright, not totally necessary. It wasn't shot in IMAX, so it wasn't necessarily. It was cool. The sound was awesome. But if you have a chance, mostly just check it out in 2D. The 3D was really unnecessary, and the IMAX was cool. If there's an IMAX theater around you showing it in IMAX 2D, check it out. I just know all the theaters near me only show movies in IMAX 3D. Sometimes they have a 2D showing, but if they have a 2D showing in IMAX, yeah, check it out. But 3D is not worth it. Totally unnecessary. So yeah, that's Man of Steel. I don't know what more I can say, but check it out. It's worth it. So it's a really awesome movie. It's not the masterpiece we were all wanting it to be, but it's definitely not as bad as people are saying. So yeah, check it out. And our next video will be me and Sam talking spoilers for Superman. And until then, talk to you guys later.